The quality of your life is based on the quality of the questions you ask. And if you ask, how can I afford to start up this company? That's less effective as how can I make millions starting up this company? How can I get paid to do every step of the startup? I was busy, but I wasn't productive. Because productive means that I'm caring enough about another human being to do something that serves people enough where they feel by sustainable fair exchange, they'd like to remunerate me for that. They have a value on it. I delegate all my stress to other people. It would be stress to me, I give it to them and it's not stress to them. So what you do is you move stress into an area where it's now no longer stress and give it to people that love doing it.
Before we start this podcast, I have one little favor to ask you. Can you please hit the subscribe button down below so we can help more people every single week? Thank you. Let's kick off. Where I'd like to start is, what do you think is one area that a lot of young entrepreneurs are neglecting that would give them the biggest unlock to move their progress forward?
Well, it's very common for really not just young, but young particularly, to project assumptions onto the market based on their own individual beliefs about what the market needs instead of actually finding out what the market's willing to buy. And to really not make assumptions and projections, but to actually take the time and do a little research and make sure there's a demand for the supply of the product, service, or idea that you intend to bring to the world. And a little foresight on that can pay off because otherwise you're pushing uphill and you're trying to find out indirectly over time and burn a lot of cash flow. So I tell people to do a little homework and make sure that there's a real demand, because everybody gets a really great idea and they sometimes are in their amygdala, which is the desire center, to go and do it. And they create kind of fantasies of what everybody wants and then really don't really articulate the product, service, or idea in a way that really matches the demand. And the moment they hit it, that niche is born and they can start to build a incremental momentum that becomes unstoppable. So taking the time to make sure that they have sustainable, fair exchange between what their dream is and what the market is wanting really liberates people from a lot of having to push uphill games.
Have you ever read Lean Startup by Eric Ries?
No. I understand the terminology being lean startups. I really believe that's a wise thing. Don't go and exaggerate how you're going to change the world and then find out you just wiped out your cash with all debt. A lot of people go out and get in debt instead of testing markets. I'm the kind of guy that I ask, and whoever's listening out there, the quality of your life is based on the quality of the questions you ask. And if you ask, how can I afford to start up this company? That's less effective as how can I make millions starting up this company? How can I get paid to do every step of the startup? And that opens up another way of doing it. When I first opened up a business years ago, almost 5 decades ago, I did it by borrowing. And then I learned how to do it the second time by producing and scaling. And so just ask, how can I get handsomely and beautifully paid to do every step of the business development? How can I get handsomely and beautifully paid to scale up my business? Not how can I go and borrow money and get debt and give away ratios of my business and equity and everything else. That may be useful, but you may be going to bed with people you don't know, and you may be putting yourself under burdens that are unnecessary. But if you ask that question, I had a lady that asked that question and turned a dog into 100 million. A dog. She came to my Breakthrough Experience program, and I asked her, what is it you would absolutely love to do in your life? And she said, I love spending time with my dog. I said, how can you get handsomely and beautifully paid to do that? She says, I have no idea. And I said, how can you get handsomely and beautifully paid to spend time with your dog? And she goes, I'm blank. I have no idea. How do you get paid to be with a dog? I said, how can you get handsomely and beautifully paid to spend time with your dog? Finally, she came up with, my dog's cute. People like to take pictures. I can charge for it. The worst thing can happen is they'll say no, but I might make some money. So she did. And she started out and she made $5 the first day. And then she went back and she started getting creative about what would make people want to buy a picture of a dog. And then she started getting him dressed up differently and fixing him up. And I mean, putting makeup on him and fixing him up and, putting outfits on him and making him where everybody wanted to take a picture. And she eventually got it up to about $150 a day walking her dog. And then she started getting more creative and dressing herself up and the dog up and making it a match, and got a card. And it was, I'm his agent, and he's now a famous model. And she just had some fun with it. And finally, a company came to her and said, "I think we could use your dog in as a brand, in a company." And so she ended up being the Milk Bone Dog Biscuit mascot and made 2.2. That was the first deal out of that came out of it. Then she got two more deals, and that was 7 million. Then she ended up starting to. The dog got so famous that everybody wanted to have a picture with it. Celebrities. I mean, she went to the Academy Awards, you name it, and brought the dog. And then she ended up with 3 television series, Doggy Moms. And then she ended up making paraphernalia for what do you call it? Bathrobes for dogs and carrying cases for dogs and makeup for dogs, and just went bonkers with it. Brought up to $100 million, and she netted $26 million out of that dog. And that all started with a quality question: how do you get handsomely paid to do what you love, and get handsomely paid to do it? And what are the highest priority actions you can do to make it happen? And what obstacles might you run into, and how do you solve them in advance? What worked and what didn't work today? How do you do it more effectively and efficiently tomorrow? And no matter what happened today, how did it get me one step closer towards being prospering by doing what I really love to do? Those are very powerful questions.
It's really the one step forward approach, right? Because I think, you said you came back from a borrowing business mentality. I was the same. I was early startup kind of vibe where you raise a ton of money. A bunch of my friends have raised 10, 20, 30 million. And then it is an uphill battle playing a game that's often a loser's game, because the VC doesn't give a shit about you, to many regards. However, that woman in particular just took one step forward, and then that became the ongoing pursuit of what she wanted to do anyway. So what's kind of the science there in terms of like the actual natural path? I think you made a great point about the questions you ask. Is that most important in the beginning? Like, how do we break down that concept?
Yeah, because the difference between disorder and order is the questions you ask. And obstacles are nothing more than missing information. So it's just about asking the right question to get the information you need to move to the next step. But if you ask, I mean, I learned when I opened up my second office, it was quite interesting. I went to a furniture store, and I said, just at first I went to an art store, an art gallery. And I said, just out of curiosity, how much art do you have stored in the back that's not even being visible to be sold? And she says, a majority of it. I got no more than 15% out on the warehouse. I said, so a lot of that stuff's just sitting there and it's not going to sell. And I said, if I was to ask you to bring some of that art to an opening to a doctor's clinic system and put art all over the place, and then I was to have you do a little 5-minute or so, pitch, and I was to promote you and let you know about that in front of 400 very viable people in the city, would you be willing to bring the art out there? And if so, I have about 70 new patients coming through every day. If I was to expose your art on a daily basis, and take a 15% commission, which is your normal commission rate, and just have art in my thing, could you use a free gallery and make the same thing and actually save you some money? So anyway, I had massive turnover and great art in my office for nothing, and I made profit. And then what happened is I was able to sell some of it and then get that paid for my own free art. So I did that with furniture. I did that with art. I did it with all kind of office supply stuff. I started to figure out, how do I get paid to have this material in here and to build my business the second way without having to borrow any money, but actually get paid to have the materials in there. And I ended up not having any debt and prospering right away. And then I actually asked myself, how can I go and get clients? So I went out and literally went door to door and introduced myself and did surveys of what doctors, what patients were looking for, and every aggravation they had in a doctor's office, And I wrote it all down, and I made sure my office was everything that was the opposite of what they experienced in doctors' offices. And then I put on a television series on my work, and I had 400 clients when I opened up. So I didn't pay. Got paid. So I learned a long time ago the quality of your life is based on the quality of the questions asked. Ask quality questions, and how do you get handsomely paid up front to do all the steps you want to do? You just might save yourself enormous amounts of money, might not have to put yourself in bed with people that you don't even know, and you might not give away your percentage of your business and lower your cost and increase your acceleration. Then once you've got a proven product, then your venture capitalists that they want to come in and scale it up, you're in the driver's seat instead of them in the driver's seat.
Isn't it so interesting that the best products are built for yourself initially? Like, you looked at all those issues and you thought, I'm going to do the reverse for it. It was the same with me. So our businesses, we were growing and managing podcasts. I looked at all of the different podcasts in the world. I looked at how we're growing ours, and we basically productized it to sell it to enterprises, startups, entrepreneurs, and so on. When I went to build my studio that I mentioned to you earlier, I had been in studios all across the world, and I just thought, well, I hate when the camera goes out of focus. I actually hate when the moderator is not even looking at the lens. Let's just fix all these issues. Let's make it kind of cool and moody and everything. And one of my friends, and recently, he knew it was going to be of really good quality because I would have made it for myself. And that becomes what you can scale and also what you enjoy, right? Because in the pursuit of building something like a studio, it's difficult, it sucks, it's challenging. But because I actually enjoy it, I can see the path. Whereas you can connect those dots. Whereas I came from a software engineering background, I hated programming, hated it. So nothing I could do could make myself enjoy it. Just couldn't do it. So it's very interesting. The best products come from the solutions that we want for ourselves.
Yeah, well, I learned a long time ago, and this is important. Can I share something that really helped me scale up my business? Because every entrepreneur can benefit from this, if you don't mind. So I'm 27 years old, and I open up my clinic, and I was sitting there going, I'm doing everything. You start out, sometimes you're a generalist, and you're doing just about everything, whatever it takes, is you don't think you can afford it, and you don't think all this and that. So I went to a bookstore, and I got a book called The Time Trap by Alec McKinsey. And I read that and dog-eared it and summarized it. And I put this page together, this series of pages together, that had 6 columns in it. In the very far left column, I wrote down every single thing that I do in a day. And I imagined myself over about a 3-month period. What have I done in a day? And I made a list of every single thing that I did in a day, from the time I get up to the time I go to bed. And I differentiated it into that was just personal and professional, or home and work. And just wrote it all out. And as I was making that list, I was already thinking, man, am I doing a lot of low priority stuff? I'm majoring in minors and mining in majors. As I'm making that list, it's already becoming evident. Just my weird, just that exercise. Then on the next column, so I wrote down daily actions. That was the first column. The second column is how much is it producing? How many dollars is it producing per hour for that action? And I was blown away. More than 50% of what I was doing wasn't paying.
What would be examples of things you were doing that weren't paying? Do you want to grow and monetize your podcast, but you don't know where to begin? Have you tried all the tricks and hacks, but nothing has worked? Have you been wasting time, money, and energy and seeing an analytics chart with no growth? That's where Vox comes in. We've been helping podcasts grow and monetize their shows for many years. We've grown shows to over 100 million views, done over 10 million downloads, we've generated over $2 million in only the last year alone. And we can help you grow and monetize your own podcast. We've had some shows go from absolutely zero. We've had some of the biggest influencers in the world come to us to help and improve their show. So if you want to learn exactly our podcast growth flywheel and exactly how we can do this for you and completely replicate success, schedule a call right down below with myself, and we can go through the exact model for you and to grow your podcast this year.
Oh, I was doing administration work, and it indirectly was making money, but it wasn't actually making cash flow. It was kind of a derivative that makes cash flow. So I realized, I made a list, and the number one thing that made the most is going out and sharing my message with people in speaking opportunities to expose them to the services that I provide. So leveraging the spoken word, was mainly through live speaking and then radio and television. So it was very evident that's where I needed to go. The second was the actual clinical application. The third was training people to help me do the things that I wanted to delegate. And I made a list of everything in it, and I went from something I could generate about 15 to 18,000 an hour in one, all the way down to zeros. And I then prioritized that list all the way down that list. And I was just blown away by literally half of what I was doing wasn't really producing, but I was doing it. I was busy, but I wasn't productive. Because productive means that I'm caring enough about another human being to do something that serves people enough where they feel by sustainable fair exchange they'd like to remunerate me for that. They have a value on it. So that was my measuring of service to people. In the next column, I wrote down, how much meaning does it have on a 1 to 10 scale? If it's a 10, I can't wait to get up and tap dance to work. If it's a 1, I'm not engaged and I need to be motivated. McGregor said that's the theory X people at the bottom. Theory Y is when you're inspired. And I made that list, that same list, I prioritized it according to meaning. It turned out that the top things that actually produced the most also overlap some of the ones that meaning. So I now know this is where I really want to spend my time, and this is what produces. So it was really eye-opening to go through that little exercise. Then the next column was, how much would it cost me to put in a really high-quality person to delegate that to? And what would it cost for everything? Not just their salaries, but cost, space, marketing, training, paper, computers, depreciation schedules, you name it, taxes, everything, insurance. And I made a list of what that would cost to have somebody do that action. Then I prioritized that list according to spread between what I could produce per hour doing it versus what it would cost me per hour. So I had that prioritized. Then I over there on the next column, the fifth column was how much time actually do I need somebody to do this? 1 hour a day, 5 hours a day, once every week? How often? So I'm hiring according to what's needed for a job description. And the last is the final prioritization. And then I layered these things into 10 layers, literally drew a line across them once I prioritized them. And then I put a job description for each one and went from the bottom one, the one that was the least important, down to the one at the top that's my most important one, me, duplicating me. And I layered it, put the job description, and hired it, liberated, hired, liberated, hired, liberated. Every time I did that, my income went up, my outreach went up, my vitality and energy went up, my feeling of confidence to take, thoughtful actions went up, and my brand went up. It just started, doors of opportunity came, because when you live according to highest values and priorities, you value yourself, and so does the world. But when you don't, you devalue yourself, and so does the world. So the world is kicking your butt to give you feedback to make sure you're living authentically according to what you truly love to do, that really truly serves in a sustainable, fair manner. And that's the universe is giving you feedback and guiding your business to grow.
Why do you think people don't realize the highest value priority for them and give themselves that credit, I guess, that they are a higher value person? They don't put their confidence in themselves, make the investment in the team, make the investment in the people to elevate them, which was kind of me as an early entrepreneur, right? I grinded, but now we have a team, we have resources, and we can allocate and delegate. Why do you think people don't believe that they can do it?
Well, Albert McKinsey addresses that in his book, The Time Trap. By the time I could delegate, I could have done it. The way I do it is better than them, and they don't know what they're doing, and I don't want to have to do it again. And what they're doing is they're hiring people that are Z people, not A people. They're hiring people that are not inspired to do the job, and they're trying to save money instead of actually hiring people that know more about it and can do a greater job than they can, so they can liberate themselves. See, if you help other people get what they want to get in life, you get what you want to get in life. If you help other people do jobs that they're inspired to do, you get to do the job you're inspired to do. That's it. And you're helping the economy. So it doesn't cost to delegate. You can't live an inspired and self-actualized life unless you're delegating, because you're going to do too much low priority things. That's why I delegate everything. Even to my girlfriend, I tell her, listen, if I was to hire George Clooney to make love with you on my behalf, would you still love me? She says, I'd love you even more.
It's so interesting, right? Because there's the counter approach to this, which is like, oh, solopreneurship, do it on your own, grind it out. But I've never had a business whereby I did everything. I've never had that system. Maybe there's a way to systematize things if it's just digital products or whatnot. But at the same time, the people that I've brought into my world, they are experts in a specific area. This could be like emotional intelligence. It could be empathy. They could interact with a client a lot better than I could ever interact with a client. Then the other person could be the grinder, the person that can be an operations ninja in the back end. But there's always that almost like combination of personalities instead of finding the cheapest, fastest resource that I can fill the void. Because Sahil Bloom told me before that like a lot of these tough conversations we have, you build up like a tough conversation debt. The debt continuously increases and the problem keeps on rising until it comes to a head. You lose a client, your business drops in revenue, all that stuff will just come to a head. So it's very interesting how you explain like the energy that you emit is almost the energy that you receive. That's like the concept of how all of this intertwines together. It's not just about delegation. It's about how do you value yourself and the energy that you put out to get the energy that you receive, right? And this is a big difference from me trying to go from 7 figures a year to 8, is that I know that what I did at 6 and 7 figures a year was just brute force. How hard could I bang my head off the table? But 7 to 8 is like who, not what, in many regards.
Well, if you're not delegating, you're trapped. And so I'm delegate everything. I haven't driven a car in 35 years, 35 years. I haven't cooked since I was 24. I've got a concierge. I've got a pilot. I've got a captain. I've got everything delegated out, and I'm useless other than teach, research, write, and travel. I mean, that's the only thing I'm great at. That's the only things I love doing. I don't waste my time on anything that requires motivation, incentive, or reminding to do, extrinsic motivation of any form. I delegate. I'm only going to do what I spontaneously am inspired to do, which is teach, research, write, and travel. And I go and work out once a week. I do a little workout. I don't want to have to do it because I have to. I do it because I absolutely love to do that workout. And I just structured my life so it reduces it. I'm 70 years old. I don't and I have more energy than most people.
You are 70.
Yeah, I'm 70 because most people don't have the energy I need. Well, good. Don't tell my girlfriend.
Tell me where you got that hair. I'm gonna need that as I get older. You look insane for 70.
Yeah, 70 years old. And I found out that if I delegate all my stress to other people, but would be stress to me, I give it to them and it's not stress to them. So what you do is you move stress into an area where it's now no longer stress and give it to people that love doing it. And then you've dissolved the stress. Stress is a feedback to let you know that you're not doing something congruent with what you value most. That's all it's a symptom of.
Okay, explain that a bit more detail, right? Because we need to look at it through the lens of like your setup, your life setup. So you're 70, you got hair that's nearly better than mine, you're fit, you're healthy, you're mentally obviously incredibly sharp, you write a ton. How have you designed a life in that regard that you don't have the negative impacts of aging? You know, aging at 70 years old is a lot different for most people than you right now.
Yeah, well, there's only 2 forms of distress. Only 2 forms. The perception of loss of that which you seek, or the perception of gain of that which you avoid. So you take any stress you've ever had in your life, it's always one of those 2. The perception of loss of something you're seeking, which represents prey in the amygdala in the brain, prey, because you want food and you're afraid of losing food, which would be starvation to death. And the fear, the loss of the gain of that which you're wanting to avoid, which is predator, which is being eaten to death. So the brain only has the fear of starvation and the fear of being eaten, the predator-prey game inside the nuclei of the amygdala. So once you understand that, anything that supports your values represents prey. Anything that challenges your values represents predator. So I have a value determination process to determine what my values are. And I basically take those things that are highest in value, where you're most objective, where you're more neutral and you're not attached. So it's like the Buddhist non-attachment to it that liberates you. Because when you're neutral and non-attached, you don't fear the loss or the fear the gain. You're just going in the flow. But as long as you're in the amygdala, you're going to be in this idea, I'm seeking and avoiding. I always say the master lives in a world of transformation. The masses live in the illusions of gain and loss because they're always afraid of losing and gaining things. And that's where all the stresses are. So if you're doing what you love to do, you don't attach to success and the fear of failure. You don't attach to avoid failure. You don't think in terms of failure and success. You consider yourself a man on a mission. I'm a man on a mission. I'm not addicted to success or fearing failure. None of those mean anything. I'm just methodic. I don't compare myself to other people. I compare my daily actions to my own values and my own objectives. So if I measure that, there's no comparisons. And it's when you get into comparisons of other people and inject other people's values or project your values onto them and trying to get you to live in their values or them into your values, that's where all the stresses come. But if you delegate those things that are lower on your values to people that have it higher on theirs, you create sustainable, fair exchange with people, and that gives you a lot less stress in life.
How do you determine your values?
Well, on my website, drdemartini.com, there's a 46-year summary system I put together going back to when I was 23, to almost 24 years, almost 47 years now. But I look at how people fill their space. I look at how they spend their time. I look at what energizes them most. I look at what they spend their money on. I look at what they are most organized and ordered in. I look at where they're most disciplined, reliable, and focused. I look at what they think about, visualize, and internal dialogue with themselves about most, about how they would love their life to be that shows evidence of coming true. I look at what they converse with other people about spontaneously. I look at what inspires them and brings tears to their eyes. I look at what it is that they have as persistent, consistent goals that are manifesting with evidence. And I look at what they love studying spontaneously and reading and feeding their mind. And there'll be a pattern that shows up if you do that exercise. It's 13 questions, 39 answers. And at the end of it, you're going to see that it's pointing you in a direction of what your life demonstrates important to you, not what you fantasize. Because if you ask people by the millions, I guarantee you most of them fantasize about what's important to them, but that's not what matters. What matters is what their life demonstrates is important to them. You can ask people, how many of you want to be financially independent? Everybody will put their hand up. How many of you are financially independent? All the hands will go down. So what will happen is not what they say they want, but what their life is actually demonstrating daily, what they're committed to. That's why I go through and I have a value determination to help you determine that. And when an entrepreneur starts with that clarity, they're going to have a way more advantage than if they're living an illusion of who they are and having to discover who they are.
So interesting you observe that, because I'm looking at it from maybe a different lens. We can go deeper on this too. One of my mentors said to me before that, everyone thinks they're going to become a millionaire. Like literally everyone thinks that they're going to become wealthy, but no one is doing the actions to actually become that person that's going to be a millionaire, or worse than that, they're not even doing anything in general. So they have this illusion, this delusion, which is they believe the outcome is going to happen without the input variables. So the only way you can have that optimal delusion is by actually doing the work. Like there's nothing wrong with believing someone you can be this person if you're doing the work in pursuit of that. It's almost like you need to convince yourself that you are that person. Like I wanted to be fit before I got fit. I wanted to be wealthy before I was wealthy. I wanted to have a good relationship and get married before I got married. But it's almost like we need to sit down and actually like literally do the work. So how does that translate into the values? Because lots of people think that they're virtuous. They think that they're good intentions, and for the most part, a lot of people are, of course. But behind closed doors, when the cameras are off, are they really living in alignment with that outcome? Or am I thinking of this wrong? Should it not be outcome driven?
Moral hypocrisies and idealisms that society has compiled from tradition, convention, and mores are not necessarily an individual's values, and people get those confused. I look at what your life demonstrates you do, because whatever's highest on your value, you spontaneously are inspired from within to go and act on it. You don't need external motivation to do it. And if you're not spontaneously doing what you say is important to you, it's not important to you. So if you're not integral and walking your talk according to what you say is important, it's not really important. It's just words. And most people just have words.
Is that to do with the vehicle, or is that to do with the alignment of the person? Let me give an example. Is that like building the business, which people can do, disgruntledly, or is it more like integrity of like waking up and doing the shit you're meant to do? Like what's Where's the line there? I'm a little bit confused.
I'm a businessman, but I don't do administration. I don't do marketing. I don't do any of those. I just teach, research, write, and travel. I've found the niche in my business that I do. I spontaneously do it. If you can find anybody that's had to motivate me in the last 52 years to do that, you got a free seminar because you won't find it. I don't need motivation for that. But I would need motivation if you asked me to do a bank reconciliation or administrative stuff or whatever. So teasing out of the business where you really spontaneously excel and what you really are dedicated to doing is important. Because it's easy to say I'm an entrepreneur, but really what's really true is what are the components of the entrepreneurship is really your core mastery and where you absolutely can't wait to get up and tap dance to do that. And delegating everything else around you to people who love doing that is where the power is. And so knowing what that is what that value determination process on my website's for. And a lot of people around the world use that because if they don't know what that is, they're going to make this idea, well, I see so-and-so do it, so I need to do that. And I'm going to grind and force that to happen. And then they wonder why they keep having sabotage or they can't stay focused or they're not disciplined or whatever. All those symptoms are feedback to let them know that they're trying to do something that's not truly highest on their priorities. And you can do whatever you love. If a lady can go make $100 million playing and walking her dog, it's because she found what it is that she loved doing. And she kept catalyzing all the things and then surrounding herself with people that knew how to build the rest of the components. And you've done that obviously in your business to help you excel in your business. And there's no reason you can't. But knowing what that is and not trying to be somebody you're not, because I really believe that the symptoms of society and your life will give you feedback to get you to authenticity and to get you to priority. And it'll create symptoms every time you get away from that to get you back to that.
How do you define the symptoms of like authenticity with the difference between exposure therapy of new vehicles and opportunities? Let me give an example. So if you're running a business as you are, let's say you have a clinic and you're doing well, and then you know to grow the business, you need to expand. You need a second clinic or a third clinic, or maybe you might do something different, a little bit different of a variety. You have internal resistance and then you expose yourself to it. When do you know that the resistance is bad for you versus actually a benefit to the business and to you personally?
Resistance is all perception. I can take anything that you do and I can ask, how is it helping you fulfill what's most meaningful? And I can reduce the resistance. The purpose of your executive function in your brain and your medial prefrontal cortex is to create strategies that allow you to see clear vision of how you get past your obstacles. So a lot of your resistance is because you didn't put the strategy in place. You didn't think through how you can get what you want. And you're just going through it with an old pathway that's not going to get you that outcome. So that's your resistance. But if you're basically doing what you love and surrounding yourself with people that know how to do the rest, you keep excelling because your genius is always in whatever's highest on your value. Your medial prefrontal cortex is the narrative center of your brain, and it basically allows you to maximize your potential. And the blood glucose and oxygen goes there the second you're living by priority. And that area of the brain is linked to the V5, V6 area of the occipital cortex and activates inspired vision. And people that have clarity of vision, they go farther than people that can't see the vision. So one of the signs of being congruent is you get clarity of vision. There's 6 transcendental states that occur. You're grateful for your job. And Peter Lynch, you probably remember Peter Lynch from the 90s. Peter Lynch said that after he does his technical and quantitative analysis on his stocks, he'd get in his jet and he'd go over to the actual headquarters of the companies and he'd go walking around and meet the people in the companies. He says, if I see people that are grateful for their job, loving what they're doing, inspired by the vision, enthusiastically working, certain about their skill, and present while they're working, I'm going to buy the company because it's going to appreciate in value. Because that's an asset accumulation. But if people are not having that, you're not going to get inspired vision. You're not going to have it happen. So that's called engagement. The maximizing engagement maximizes and scales up businesses. And that's basically maximizing how congruent people are with what they're doing on a daily basis. Nobody goes to work for the sake of a company. They go to work to fulfill what's most meaningful and fulfilling in their lives, what's highest on their values. If they can see how their job duties are helping them do it, they're inspired to go to work. If they can't, they're going to be asking, well, how much are you going to pay me? And how many hours do I get off on vacation? And if you have any of those signs or symptoms and they're not inspired to go to work, you're holding your company back. You're weighing it down. So engagement, that's why, Twitter or whatever, they got rid of half the people in Twitter, more than half the people, and they flourished because they were having deadbeats. I spoke at IBM one time, about 400 people at IBM, and I came up on stage, and the regional manager's right in the front, and they introduced me, and I come up on stage, and I said, how many of you can't wait to get up in the morning and work for one of the greatest companies in the world, IBM? This is back in the 80s. And no hands went up, but one, the manager. No hands went up. And I thought, can you all hear me? The mic off? I said, how many of you can't wait to get up in the morning, go to work and work for one of the greatest companies in the world, IBM? Because that was it was a great company at the time. Nobody had their hands up. And I basically came down from the stage and walked down the aisle, 400 people packed. And I said, I changed the topic today because the topic you asked me for is not what's needed. So I'm going to call this day crap or get off the pot day. Change the title. And I explained to people that if you're not inspired here, you're holding your own life back. You're creating your own health issues. You're creating you're going to take that out on the dog and the wife when you get home and the husband at home. I said, this is costing you your life. If you're not inspired to do this on a daily basis and you're costing the company, you're affecting the customers, you're affecting the bottom line, the shareholders, everybody. So if you're not inspired here, we're going to do what we can to get you either inspired or out of here.
Isn't that crazy? The knock-on effect. Isn't that the ripple effect?
70% of the people in that room walked that day. They gave their notice. 70.
I don't think IBM are a fan of you anymore.
No. 2 weeks later, the manager sent me a letter. This is the old day when you had letters. He said, Dr. Demartini, thank you for what you did for IBM. We're in a hiring mode. We're making sure that everybody is screened for their values. We're making sure people are inspired. You saved us a fortune of outplacement. We were about to downsize and get rid of some of the people, and they walked and saved us a fortune, and we're now hiring people, and we're on fire.
Isn't that crazy how the variable of time has the biggest effect on that? So if you have a bad culture or people are not a good fit, that it may not play a role in the next 30 days, but in the next 90 or 180 or 2 years, you see that impact decline in the business, which is kind of just so interesting. And then there's also the element of how that impacts their other aspects of life. You mentioned the wife, everything. It really does have that ripple effect. And I don't think people realize that. And if you think about work culture in the 80s versus now, in the 80s, this was not really discussed. You just kind of went to work, you kind of got on with it, and you went home. And now we're seeing how important that actually is, which is why smaller companies, they have a good culture, people have a better standard of living overall.
Well, the lady that hired me for this talk, she's the one that came and asked me to do the talk. She said that day, right when I finished, and they gave their notice, she said, of course, I probably lost my career and my job. And I said, if you did, you're probably part of the problem.
Oh my God.
And she didn't have anything nice to say about me. But I'm not here to be nice. I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to do what I know will help the company. That's my job. And so about 3 weeks later, maybe a week after I got the letter from the manager, she came personally to the office and said, do you have a moment to speak? And she put her arms around me. Now, I didn't expect that. And she cried. And she said, because I brought you into the company and because of what's happened to the company, and we got rid of the dead weight, we trimmed the tree, we are flourishing right now. And they've given me a promotion because I hired you. I wanted to cuss you out. I didn't want to ever see you again. I was hating you. I thought you destroyed my career and my life. But right now I realize you just catalyzed what you said is what we needed to hear, but nobody wanted to hear it. Nobody wanted to hear it until you spoke.
Isn't that so interesting how much we hide from the truth? That the truth is often in front of us, but we want to hide from it. And we hide under this false pretense of what okay is versus facing it head on.
Like good to great. Our amygdala wants pride and wants fantasy. Our executive center wants an outcome, a vision, and results. And if we let the amygdala run our life, we're going to do what the Buddha says. The desire for that which is unobtainable and the desire to avoid that which is unavoidable is the source of human suffering. And we're going to keep going after the fantasy and keep trying to dodge the responsibilities. But when we actually get on our executive center, we absolutely love doing the accountable actions that give us great results.
Do you want to know how we book the most amazing guests on our podcast like you're seeing today? I've created a full template and guide and every single script that I've ever used to get the best guests in the world, and I've put everything together in a simple step-by-step process. If you click the link down below, I'll give you the exact guide to book any guests on your podcast, and I have a full guest management system for you to manage every single guest. If you want to see the process behind booking guests like Justin Waller, Luke Belmar, Sterling Cooper, and every guest in the online business space, click the link down below and you'll get the full guide for free. Thank you. Talk to me a little bit about self-sabotage and also running out of motivation with your goals. So I feel that a lot of people will build a business and they'll get to a certain threshold and they almost either burn it down. It's very common. People like burn it down and start something new, or they run out of motivation with this. And I guess to give you a personal example here is that I was building my business for a lot of personal things like in my life, and a lot of personal things actually went to shit, like literally went to shit. Like a ton of stuff just really fucked up. So that initial motivation wasn't the reason why I was doing it anymore. And I kind of went through this like 90-day transition period, which is like, okay, get myself back on the horse and like almost like find like a different goal. And now I'm like all good for the most part. But how do you think about that? Because like in that regard, I could have easily just went vroom and went on the wrong path. Does that make sense? How does that feed into the entrepreneur's journey?
When you start your entrepreneur journey, you start out by yourself. The complexity of one person is one. The complexity of two people is two. The complexity of three people is six. It's what they call factorial mathematically. The complexity of four people is 24. The complexity of five people is 120. Six people, 720. And it goes up from there. So it geometrically progresses the complexity, and it requires a different set of skills. And there are some people that are innovators and creators and visionaries, and there's other people that are managers and detail people. So that you're automatically going to burn out if you're trying to be somebody you're not when you require at the next level different specialties. And many times you end up burning out trying to put all the fires out and doing all the stuff, managing things when you're a visionary and you're a human being interactor, not a manager and detail person. So a lot of times people then hit the Peter principle of incompetency, and then they think, well, I can't do this. And then they undermine it to go back to what they know their comfort zone, instead of getting the proper people in place and stick to what your core competence is. As Buffett said, get to your core competence, know what it is, know thyself, be thyself. You'll love yourself if you do. But you try to get outside that, and as you scale up, you're going to end up having to do things you may not want to do. I don't want to manage. I am the visionary. I'm the guy that loves researching and writing and teaching. I don't want to manage people all day long. I did that at one time. I learned not to do that. That wasn't my core competence, but I put people in place that loved doing that. Boom, I went to the next level because I was no longer having to do something that was uninspiring, that was burning me out. Anytime you're doing something low in priority, you're going to have boredom and burnout as a feedback to guide you back to what's priority. It's a feedback system. And some people don't get past it, and they think I've got to do that because that's what somebody else did. So I need to be like somebody else instead of give yourself permission to be you in a world that wants you to be something that's other than you.
When you feel yourself having that bit of a resistance and then it runs into self-sabotage, what have you seen in the self-sabotage? Do you see people really, go off the rails personally or professionally? Like, how does that play out?
I've never really seen self-sabotage. That's a term that people use when they have misinterpreted the feedback that their physiology and psychology and events around them are giving them feedback that they're not living by priority. That's all. So when the second you do, if I had to do administrative stuff, I'd procrastinate, hesitate, frustrate, not be disciplined, and I would be off track. But give me research, writing, traveling, and teaching, and I can do it 20 hours a day. No problem. 20 hours a day. And I do it because I know that core competence. That's my area. If I had to do the other stuff, I'd end up having all the signs, and you would then look at me and goes, he's sabotaging. He's uninspired. He's beating himself up. I would. You're designed to beat yourself up when you're not being yourself. You're designed to be procrastinative, hesitative, resistant, frustrated. and burned out and bored when you're not being yourself. You're designed that way. It's not a mistake. It's not a flaw. It's not a weakness. It's the physiology giving you feedback that you're not authentic at this moment. And whenever you do, you're in your amygdala, and the amygdala then wants fantasies and it wants pride. And then you lose your capacity to have sustainable, fair exchange with your employees, your customers, your shareholders, all the stakeholders. And it's a feedback to guide you back to priority. The second you get back on priority and you find the right person and delegate it out, the energies change. Right off the second you do that, the energies change again. And you start to see how the universe is actually helping you get your goal. And these symptoms are actually getting you your goal, but you're misinterpreting them because you're trying to force your will to go through it instead of actually get the feedback of what it's trying to guide you to do.
How do you deal with anxiety when you're operating at a high level?
Anxiety is obviously assuming that there's a negative without a positive. And I think of a guy that I was going to lunch with a guy that was the CEO of American Capital Corporation in Houston one time. And as we were about to go out the door to the restaurant, a guy comes in and says, we got a bit of a snag today. And one of their funds dropped $470-something million that morning. And in my mind, my stomach kind of went in a knot when I heard that from that guy. I said, I would imagine that would be a little bit of a knot cruncher. And the guy took it and he said, do this. You ready to go to lunch, John? He didn't even react. And I asked him on the way there to the restaurant. I said, how do you make decisions like that? He says, no, the right decision. I said, how do you make the right decision? He says, I don't. I said, what do you mean you don't? I just make a decision and then I turn it into making it right. I spin whatever happens in my favor. And I realize it because no matter what you do under consequentialism, there's no way of knowing the ripple effects of any action in advance, all of them. Nobody can know and have a crystal ball knowing what are all the repercussions of everything you're ever going to do. And so you go down the path and you do it, and then you find out no matter what happens, there's always two ways of looking at it. You can turn it into a mountain into a molehill or molehill into a mountain. You can find the blessings or the curses in it. If you find out how, that's why you ask the question, no matter what happened today, how did it get me one step closer to my objective? That's a quality question. No matter what happened today. So somebody's suing it. Great. How do we use that now as marketing? How do we use that to spin things into opportunity? How do we use that to grow a new product? Whatever's happening, how is it on the way? And what's it trying to teach us? And if we get that, we see it on the way, not in the way, we don't have this idea that there's a stress or a resistance, because that's a perception when things don't match our fantasy about how things are.
Yeah, I think it's very strange for people to look at something and be like, oh, like this is the negative outcome. We're doing the wrong path. It's like you make a decision and then you just back yourself in that decision. Like often the biggest elements of procrastination and stress comes from unmade decisions. Whereas if you just pick a path, it's like, oh, do we turn on the ads or off? Do we make the decision to fire the person? Have you ever heard of Jeff Bezos's one-way door, two-way door decision-making process? Oh, you'll find this interesting. So Bezos's approach was make two-way door decisions quickly, and a two-way door decision is basically what you can go back on. So let's say we run a marketing campaign. Well, if the marketing campaign doesn't work, we just shut off the ads. Whereas a one-way door decision is something you can't go back on, which is like firing your CTO. If you fire your CTO, well, he's gone and he's going to move on, and it's going to have a ripple effect throughout all your engineers. So you want to make those slower, with a bit more calculation, versus the two-way door system. Whereas most people will fantasize, procrastinate, run around in circles, ruminate in their brain on low-level decision-making, which just leaves a drag on their own energy, plus on the operational efficiency of the business as time goes on as well.
Well, every hiring process is a reflection of your own congruency. So if you're living by absolute highest priority, you're going to attract people that are going to live by priority. If you are not living by priority, you're going to find out that the symptoms in the business are feedback mechanisms guiding you to authenticity. So it's a reflection. And I worked with a company called Uniqlo Corporation in Japan. And I met with a manager who was the head of the Ginza operation. And then I got to meet with Tadashi Inai, who's the wealthiest guy in Japan. And he utilizes my value applications in his company across the world. And what's interesting is we had a meeting in his office, and we found out that when we did a value determination, when we hired people, we did a value determination when we were inspiring teams, when we led, managed, negotiated sales, communicate by values, the business went up and the engagement went up and the cost went down and the profit, I think it was $1.47 billion it increased that year when we incorporated some of that. And he saw the impact of engagement. What happens when we're going to have quality engagement? People have less symptoms. The business has less symptoms. Every symptom in the business is a feedback to guide people to engagement, high engagement, authenticity. And so, as Peter Drucker once said, when you look at people not doing their job, it's management that hired the person. They're not wrong. They're not bad people. You just put a square peg in a round hole. That's all. You find the right place for that person, they'll excel. But if you hire somebody to fit somebody in because of desperation and you don't screen them to make sure, that what the job description is actually giving them what they want in life, well, then you hired them. That's what you're getting. And you're getting feedback and symptoms and now raising overheads and now putting personnel departments in and putting controls and all. The more complex you make it, it's because of less engagement. So taking the time to find out what people's values are, to me, I would not ever hire anybody without knowing what their highest value is and what they spontaneously love doing on a daily basis. And if it's not what I'm hiring them for, don't hire them. If that's not what they dream about, don't hire them. That's what Steve Jobs was saying. If you're not inspired to do what the job is here, don't even come for it. This is. I want people that are inspired to do the job that they want to do. And believe it or not, you can find that, but it's going to be accountable for you doing that. The leader is going to lead the way. And if you're inspired to do it, you're going to see the impact of that. So congruency is a very important, that's what the source of integrity is. The medial prefrontal cortex is where the greatest integrity is in the brain. The second you live by priority, that area lights up and integrates information and allows you to see whatever happens on the way and how you can use it to achieve what you want. And that's where clarity of focus comes. That's where the great leaders are.
It's very interesting because people are familiar with from the EMIT, your business is a reflection of you. But one of my team members said to me recently that your customers are a reflection of you as well. It's the person that you replicate, right? And I kind of want to ask you around that from a client perspective. I thought your videos on that were amazing in terms of the client that you attract and how does that represent who you are at that point? How do you think about that?
Right away in practice. If I had certain people coming in, I know I had stinking thinking, ingratitude, attitude, pity party, trauma, drama, and ho hum doldrum. Because when they would come in, I could tell by if they showed up and called and go that we must be having our head up our butt today, because those people don't even show up until we're in those days. And then we realize when we're on fire and we're really congruent, then all of a sudden the people start clicking and they start referring. I've seen amazing transformations in business when they're congruent. And you can listen to the language. When you hear people saying, I got to do this, I have to do this, I must do this, I should do this, I ought to do this, I'm supposed to do this, I need to do this, they're weighing the business down. When they're going, I absolutely choose to do this is what I love doing, that business is going up. And we've mapped it and measured it, and it's obvious. So the engagement level and how much resistance on doing things has a lot to do with the flow of people that comes in there and the clients. And the clients are going to give you symptoms and drive you mad until you get congruent. And once you do, and that means telling them, Mr. Jones, I really believe that this particular business over here really matches what you need. I used to refer certain people over to other different professionals where they were more of a match. So they would be grateful. And they'd send a thank you over and then make sure I knew what my customer was and what was really the profitable customer. And if you're not measuring which ones are profitable or not, it's wise to do it. Otherwise, they're weighing you down. Because some people come in, they're not necessarily the most ideal clients. So you want to be able to narrow it down and what is. They're loving people. They're fantastic people, but not with a match what you're doing in your services. That's all. You want to find a match and give yourself permission to work with clients and say no to certain clients and give them a better opportunity where they go, where they resonate, what they need.
So one of our team members referenced something like this as well, which is like green clients, red clients. Basically, like what's the green clients that you want to replicate? So we have some clients with us that have been there for years. They're so hands off. We don't even talk to them half the time. We just work on their content and we just move on, right? And they're so chill. It works really well. We're doing our annual reviews at the moment and it's very nice. The red clients then is like a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear, I must make this work kind of vibe. But I guess my question off this is like, what's actually happening underneath at a subconscious level, like across the world and like in the earth when this is happening? Because like this shit happens over, like the more harder you push, the less progress you make. The harder you try to lose weight, the less weight you lose. Does that make sense? There's always this push and pull mechanism of the world, and I just don't understand what it is, but I feel like you do.
Well, Jung said beautifully, he says that whatever you run away from, you run into, to try to teach you that whatever you're labeling bad or good is running you. Anything that you infatuate with occupies space and time in your mind and runs your mind. Anything that you resent occupies space and time and runs your mind. Anything you infatuate, you're going to subordinate to, and you're going to sacrifice your profits to. Anything you resent, you're going to try to force them to fit the ideal that you want, and you're going to end up having to force them uphill. And those are letting you know that you're not loving the client, you're judging the client. And the judgment of the clients creates symptoms to guide you back to loving the clients and narrowing down who it is you really love in life and who you want to do business with, and niching your market so you know where you're going.
That's fascinating. Is there anything else underneath the surface there that's just happening like in the world that this creates that sort of polarity in action and reaction?
Anytime you puff yourself up and think you're greater than you are and project your idea onto the market or onto your staff, they'll create a union. Bezos had to go through that. They created a Teamsters union to bring him back down because he was customer-centric, but he wasn't employee-centric. So then the symptoms came in with the Teamsters union came in and got him now to be not only customer-centric, but now employee-centric. Well, when he did that, then all of a sudden the shareholders say, well, wait a minute now, that's going to lower our returns. So then he had to go and meet the customers and the employees and the shareholders. Well, he did. The second he meets all of them, where there's a sustainable, fair exchange with all of them, the business goes up. It skyrockets. So there's symptoms in the business letting you know when you exaggerate yourself and talk down to people, you get humbled and brought back down. When you minimize yourself and sacrifice for a client and think they're more important than they really are, and you then minimize yourself, you'll eventually say, damn it, I deserve more than this. And you'll lift yourself back up. So the symptoms in the business are going to hone you back on to what's authentic. But the key is to ask what worked, what didn't work today, and be attentive to what the feedback is. And the more attentive you are. When I was in business, I had a real interesting thing. I noticed when I had a big day and I felt like I was puffed up and I thought I was important or whatever, I would come home and my wife would just, slice me, with just nail me. And she would bring me back down to reality because I would be the king all of a sudden thinking I'm special or whatever. And she'd nail me. And then I would go, when I'd have a really down day, she'd lift me up. And I thought, well, this is a toxic deal. But what it really was is she was helping me be authentic. So I eventually realized that if I don't govern myself from within, I'm going to be having to be governed from without. People that don't have autotelia and are self-governed from their physiology and psychology will have to have sociology and theology to give them the rules and the moral and ethics to guide them in their life. But when people are self-governed, they are more empowered and more stable. So that's the executive center. So what I did is I started asking, when I had a big day, I asked about 30 questions. What patients or clients did I forget the name of? What staff member did I not thank? What paperwork did I not complete? And I humbled myself before I went, and I didn't finish that exercise of asking those questions until I got a tear of authenticity. A tear of gratitude for what you get to do on a daily basis is a moment of authenticity. When I do that, and I went home, my wife was there, present with me. It's really amazing. She was responding as an outer feedback to guide me back to authenticity when I was puffed up. Then if I had a down day or whatever, I asked, what did I do? Whose anniversary did I remember? What patients did I help? And I asked questions that lift me back up. And I didn't go home until I had a tear of gratitude for the opportunity to serve people and to be grateful for what I was doing. My business automatically on the charts became stable and grew. My stability at home changed. My staff was more productive. My clients were more steady and more. I noticed the missed appointments and unexpected appointments stabilized. The symptoms around me were feedback mechanisms to guide me to govern myself. And when I'm being authentic, I have the least amount of distraction, the least amount of impulses and instincts by the amygdala to take me away from who I really am. So it's about self-governance. I think that's why larger corporations that have more controls on them eventually the real CEO doesn't need the outer controls. They govern themselves. Like the CEO of Southwest Airlines, who was more governed than the average airline company. They had incredible volatilities. Southwest Airlines didn't allow themselves to go up or down. They stabilized themselves. So internal self-governance is more powerful than all the controls you put on people around you.
That's a great point to finish up on. I think there's a there's a part two needed for sure that goes deeper into this push and pull mechanism, as well as there's a ton of more areas, John. But I want to say a big thank you for all this help, man. I really, really do. This has been huge for me just to understand clarity, and there's more beyond just doing more work that I think a lot of entrepreneurs are waking up to internally and externally.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be with you on your show and sharing ideas and your great questions. You can see that you're engaged and you love what you're doing. So thank you.